All right, this is the video that a lot of you have been waiting for. Today I'm going to cover how to make an XML HTTP request from a client to a server and then have the server respond back to the client. And there's a whole lot of different concepts I want to talk about along the way. This is probably going to end up being a rather long video, but you can always pause it, come back to it at a later time. And here are the topics that I'm going to get to. These are some key points. So I'm going to discuss the whole relationship first, the conceptual idea of a client and a server, and how responses go back and forth. And I'll explain what's called the request response model, and what I like to call the lazy recipe model. That's my own term, and I'll explain what it means. Number two, I want to discuss the concept of single-page web apps, as opposed to apps that have multiple pages that you click through. And with that, an idea known as AJAX, and what that acronym means, what it stands for. Number three, the XML HTTP request itself and what it does and why it's called this. What is the meaning of that? There's a history behind that name, and it's important to know a little bit about that. Number four, the different data exchange formats that you can use when you want to send data from client to server and back and forth. There are essentially three that are in common usage, and there are in fact many more, and you can even invent your own. We're going to focus on JSON today. And I want to talk about the json.stringify function and what its purpose is, why we need it. The concept of a post route on the server. What is the difference between a post route and, say, something like a get route? And then I'm going to use npm, the node package manager that you've seen before in previous videos, to install a particular node module that we need to make this whole thing work on the server side. And I want to talk about sending responses back from the server to the client using response.send. And along the way, I'll point out a couple of other little neat features in later versions of JavaScript, something called fat arrow functions, which I think you'll like. Okay, so that's kind of the rundown of what this video is all about. There's a lot of stuff. Let's see how it goes. I'm going to write a lot of this code on the fly. Before I do, I want to just come over to a whiteboard and talk for just a minute conceptually about how it is that clients and servers talk back and forth to each other. I think this is key to understand, and if you get this down early, then the rest will be much clearer to you. I'm going to draw a picture of a client machine and a server, but we both know these need not be on different computers. They can both be running on your very same computer if you want to. So you could be serving a site from here on your computer. You could visit it by going to localhost, but that's not important for today. So here it is, S for server, C for client. Now, the way that web technology works, or worked for a long time, there are some caveats to this today. Something called WebSockets has somewhat changed this protocol a little bit, but in a sense, it's still at its lowest level. This is how things work. The server is not able to initiate any communication. It's kind of there waiting, sitting, serving. And the client, that's you with your browser, enter a URL up into the address bar that's up here, right? And you press return. And what that does is that actually secretly behind the scenes, it causes the initiation of an exchange between the client and the server known as a GET request. The client sends this request to the server. And along with the request, there's some headers and some information that comes first, and then the body of the request, so on and so forth, goes over from the client to the server. The server, if it likes the request, which it usually does, will send back what the client is asking for. Usually the client is asking for nothing in particular other than just /, which is the root directory. And servers are configured to respond by sending over a particular file, which has, for as long as I can remember, been designated to be index.html. And that gets sent back to the client. The client gets the response, parses the headers, takes the file, and renders it, and you see the web page. And that could be it. That could be the end of the exchange. The server at that point cannot initiate a secondary communication with the client. All it gets to do is respond to the request. So it's in a way, it's passive. The client must initiate. The server responds, and that's the end of the communication. If the client decides to send another request, then the server will respond again. But if the client doesn't do anything else, then the server will just sit there. So right off the bat, you can see that is the way the web is designed. It could be argued there's a limitation there, because if the server had some important new information that it wanted to just kind of initiate and say, hey, client, check it out. I got some new data. I want you to know about it. That's called push. We've all heard that term before. And there really wasn't for a long time any standard built into HTML for push to happen. Nowadays, we have a protocol known as WebSockets. It's relatively new, and that it actually does allow the server to initiate a communication back to the client. But that's a topic for another day, another video. So for now, the way it works is, and the way, again, 99.9% of the web still works, is that it's this sort of passive request response model. Okay. Now, when you send back index.html, that's usually not the end of the exchange, because inside index.html, in addition to a lot of information for rendering text and making it look a certain way, there's often these little script tags, right? And so if you have such a script tag inside there, script, right? And inside there you have a source element. Perhaps you're asking for some JavaScript. So my.js or something like that. That's your file, right? What that means is when the web browser goes through the HTML and gets to this script tag, it sees this and it says, okay, I need that file too. And so it does the only thing that it knows how to do. It goes back to the server and it asks for it. It says, hey, oh, by the way, I forgot. Could I also get, and now it asks specifically for my.js. It asks for that file. And the server will say, if it can find the file, it will say, sure, yeah, here you go. You can have my.js. And in the loading of a typical web page, this back and forth request response will actually happen many, many times in the first few milliseconds of you loading the page, because the HTML is actually filled with images or image tags which require resource files. There may be some audio as well. Lots of extra files have to be passed from the server back to the client. But the thing is that the client must ask for each one of them one at a time. The server doesn't offer them all up initially. And I think this is important to really understand what we're doing today. So all the client gets initially is index.html. If it wants anything else, it has to ask for it. And so embedded in the HTML are sort of, well, script tags and image elements and things like that that inform the browser that it needs to ask for more. And then the server will give it. I call this, I mentioned that I call it the lazy recipe model, because I like to analogize it to a situation where I have a recipe to bake something. Let's say I have a recipe to bake a cake, and you're the baker, and you ask me for my recipe, and I give you the recipe, and that's index.html. And that's all I give you is just the recipe. And you don't have any of the ingredients. Actually, I have all the ingredients as well. But I don't give them to you. I just give you the recipe. And you start reading it, and you get through it. You come to the first line, and it says you need 2 cups of flour. You turn back to me and you say, oh, can I get the flour? And I say, yes, here you go. I give you the flour. That's like a browser asking for an image, let's say. Then you keep going through the recipe. It says, well, I need 3 eggs. Again, you turn to me and you say, oh, could I get the eggs? And boom, I hand you the eggs back. And that process continues. Vanilla, cinnamon, whatever else you need for your cake. One by one, you ask me for the things that are in that recipe. But I don't offer them up in the beginning. All I give you is the recipe. You have to keep coming back to me time and time again, and I will only give you the specific one thing that you ask for, one at a time. And that's how the web works. And it's crucial to understand that if we're going to go forward and write these exchanges between our clients and our servers. Okay? All right. Let me pause for a minute. Okay, so let's talk about writing some code now, and we'll get the process going. So I have a project that I've already created. It's largely empty. You can see it here. It's called AJAX_example. There's a public directory inside of it. Inside of that, there's an index.html file, a myscript.js file, and I didn't bother to put additional files like a scripts, or additional directories like a scripts directory or an images directory, anything else like that. I just have them both here at the same level. And then there's a server.js file at the same level as that public directory by itself that you can see here, okay? And we're going to run that server using the node environment. Here's the server code. It's not complete yet. Here's my index.html. It's just some basic Tags, if you don't have a project such as this, you can pause the video and copy what you need to from here. I just have a header tag, right? An input, which I labeled with an ID of num, and a send button, a button with send on it with an ID, send button. And then I'm calling an external script, my script.js. Okay, so that's all that I have there right now. And then in the script.js file, there's not much, right? I'm just getting references. So far, I'm getting a reference to just the send button right here, document.getElementById, or you could use document.query selector, however it is you like to do it. I have a reference to my button, and then I have an event listener attached to it, listening for a click, and I'm going to call the function send when that's done. I've referred to this many times as the callback function. And you know, sometimes you see keyword function written right here, right? And then you kind of just put your function code right in here. That's called using an anonymous callback function if we do it that way. I'm not going to do that today. I think to keep things a little bit simpler, I'm actually going to name that callback function send. And as I've said on numerous occasions before, you do not put the parentheses there. Absolutely not, just the name of the function. That means, though, that we're going to have to go ahead and write down here a function called send. So function send, like so. All right, and in here will be the events that we want to have happen when the user clicks the button, which is going to be to send the request, the XML HTTP request to the server, whatever that means. Okay. All right. And there's the server code, which again is not quite enough yet. So I have a couple of necessary lines. I'm requiring Express to make the process of building a node server a lot easier. I'm initializing an Express app. I'm using a library known as the path module to make it easier to find the directory or the location of this project folder on my hard drive, and I'm setting a port number. You're familiar with this from a previous video. And then this is the code that actually initiates the listening of the server. This starts the server. Before I do that, I need to do one other thing. I need to add a line which is telling Express where to find its static files. Where should it serve files from? Where can it expect to find all the files that the clients are asking for, like index.html and myscript.js. So I tell it, you're going to find it in public. By the way, I want to point out that's a double underscore. Some of you in the past have commented that things didn't work, and one of the reasons was because you put a single underscore there. It's got to be two, like that. So double underscore in that case. All right. This one line will allow Express to serve anything that's in the public directory if the browser asks for it. And I want to say that again. This one line is necessary to get Express to serve everything from your public directory. Essential, because some of the tutorials that I've seen online, including this particular one here, which some of my students have used, suggest a different way of doing it. And in this particular server that's written, they use this code here to tell the server how to send index.html. But this particular block is a little bit misleading. This block of code will only ever send index.html no matter what the client asks for. Because you see that asterisk there, that's a wildcard. That means basically no matter what the client asks to get, the server will always give it index.html. And that's going to lead to problems, because if the client comes asking for an image in the public directory, instead of getting the image back, it'll get another copy of index.html. Or if the client comes asking for a script, a JavaScript, it's not going to get it. It's just going to get another copy of index.html. And that's going to confuse the client browser, because it's going to go, I thought I was getting JavaScript. Why am I getting another HTML file? What? So this is bad. I would never suggest writing this particular route in your node server file. The server has to be able to serve back anything that it's asked for, and this is not going to allow that. Okay, so there are many tutorials you can find online which give you different ways of configuring your server, and some of them are good and some of them are bad, but by and large, this is what you want to do. Just that one line, okay, and that'll make everything feasible. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and try to run my server, and y'all think it's going to work. Maybe, probably not. Never does the first time. It's not. Let's go in the directory, which I think I called, let's see, the name of my project is AJAX example. AJAX example, there we go. All right, and listing the contents, I can see I'm in there. Let's just try node server.js and watch it fail because we don't have Express installed. Cannot find module Express. So we're going to go ahead and install that now. So down at the command prompt in my giant font terminal window, I'm going to type npm for node package manager install Express. And then I'm actually going to append -- save at the end. This is a little thing that we can do to make the record of what has been installed a little bit more clear in the project directory. So npm install express -- save. All right, here we go. It installs pretty quickly. All right, and it used to be that when you put the -- save, you got a little file in here called package.json, and I'm not seeing that anymore. I just see package lock.json. So it's possible that later versions of Node are behaving a little differently than previous ones. But in this file is a record of the things that you have installed with Express, okay? All right. You don't need to visit this file in the near future, so don't worry about it for now. With that being said, I think my server is up and running. Let's see what happens. Let's run it. Okay, so that's the message that I have printed. Let's try to visit it from a browser at 5,000, localhost 5,000. Here we go. It says cannot get /. I wonder what's wrong. Let's see. Let's go back and look. So I'm just going to pause the video for a minute so I don't waste too much time, and I'll be right back. Well, the mistake I made, it turns out, was a total noob mistake. I just forgot to save my server file before I ran it. So this change, the addition of this line, wasn't saved. So if you don't hit Control S or Command S, whatever it is on your keyboard, then a lot of times that can be the problem that you're unaware of. So it's good to develop a habit of just always kind of hitting that Command S all the time. So I saved it, and then I quit it using Control C. That's right there, Control C to quit, and then I just ran it again. And this time when I visited from the page, you can see I got the request from the server. I mean, the response from the server. I got the index.html page. I could type in the box and hit send, but nothing happens at this point. Okay, if I open up my console on the right-hand side, it doesn't have any information to offer me. There's no errors or anything like that, but just, nothing is happening when I click send. If you wanted to see something happen, then you could go to your index.html page and, my script, and inside here you could do something like console.log. You clicked the send button, and maybe that make you feel better, like it's working. Let's see, respond, let's put in something, click, and now you can see I have a message over here in my console. You click the send button. So I know that the function is working. It's nice to do that sometimes just to check that the things are happening for you. Okay. All right, so we got the server configured, we've got the client configured. Now it's time to actually roll the XML HTTP request. First, I want to talk quickly about the concept of single page versus multi-page apps and AJAX, and because I mentioned I was going to talk about this. Okay, so as it stands right now, if you were building a web app, you would have to make a decision. So if I don't know what your web application would be, but it would likely involve many exchanges of information between you and some server. And so you have to make a key decision, and that decision is, do you want multiple web pages so that as you click around in your app, the server kind of gives you a new web page, and then you do something on that web page, and then you click again, you get another web page. That would be a multi-page application. Do you want that, or do you want a single page interface that never changes. It never goes to a new web page. It never refreshes the whole page and goes anywhere else. Instead, all it does is it just repopulates the very same page with new information each time you click and do something. That would be called a single page app. And originally the web was powered by multi-page apps. But as we've evolved, single page apps have become much more popular, and there are reasons for it. It turns out users like a single interface that they can just stay with, and just as you click, the page can just kind of redesign itself and repopulate itself with new information that you get from the server. We didn't do very much of that prior to around, I don't know, the mid-2000s, 2004, 2005. Instead, applications consisted of multiple pages that you had to click through. And there are some real challenges with that. Persisting information from one page to the next is difficult. And so a single page app has some real benefits. So the difficulty with doing a single page app, though, is you need to learn how to send bits of information, pieces of information from the client to the server and then back and forth. Not entire new web pages, just information back and forth. And that's what this thing we're doing today is. Where this XML HTTP request to the server is a way of sending just some information, just asking for some additional information from the server and then getting it back and repopulating the page with just that information. So you can stay on your page as opposed to having to go to a new page. And in general, when this technique was first invented, being used mid-2000s, it was called AJAX, AJAX. And that stands for something. The term means asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Kind of silly that the A is and, but an XML. And XML it's a format for exchanging data. It's not widely used so much anymore, but it was 15 or so years ago. It still is used, just not as much. And so this whole concept evolved around a protocol of exchanging data called XML. Let's see if I could show you just a quick example of XML. We'll come over here and see if we can find some. Yeah, so here's a simple example of it. XML looks a lot like HTML. Instead of having predefined tags, though, you define the tags. It's sort of an outline structure of nested tags that contain information inside of them. And depending on what kind of information you wanted to exchange, it would be up to you to design your tag system so that two people could have a communication. Both the sending party and the receiving party have to agree on what these tags mean so that they can communicate. And that standard of information exchange using these brackets that you see here was called XML. It still is called XML. That's not a great example. I'd love some. Here's something a little bit better, right? You can see there's a lot of data here that's being exchanged. But if you look through it for a minute, it makes sense, right? You've got a CD catalog with sub entries, title, artist, country, company, price, year, so on and so forth, right? Examples of XML. Well, when data was being exchanged this way between client and servers back in the mid-2000s, it was always this kind of data, XML. And so we had the XML HTTP request to the server for exchange of XML data. Unfortunately, we don't use XML that much anymore. It's been replaced with JSON or JavaScript object notation in modern years. And so, but this has not changed its name. It's still, so I would argue it's got a bad name by today's standards because nobody really knows what XML is anymore, not so much anyway. But some of these terms are a bit antiquated. So when you hear people talk about AJAX, that's what they're talking about, asynchronous JavaScript and XML. And again, the reason for it is because we want to stay on a single page. We don't want to be refreshing web pages and sending multiple pages back and forth between the client and the server. We just want to hang here and just exchange information. All right, so let's do it. Let's make it happen. Here we go. This is so for those of you who don't like the detail or don't like the theory, and you're just like, hey man, just give me the code. I just want to know how to do it. This is where it's at. So now we're going to start writing some of the code. So here we go. So let's start off on the client side because we actually have to configure both the client and the server to make this exchange happen. So in the client script, Inside the send function is where we're going to do most of our work. And you can find the steps for doing this everywhere online with just a 5-second search. So there's no mystery to how this happens, okay? So here we go. I'm going to start off I'm going to create the request first, okay? So that you can see how it works. So we'll create the request using a variable. This can be anything. It's very common that people call it XHR. I have often seen it called OREQ, O-R-E-Q as well. So either of these is the common syntax, but you can call it Fred if you want to, okay? And you actually don't need the window. Everything that you type like that is assumed to be, if it's not prepended by some object, it's assumed to be on the window itself. So you simply need a new XML HTTP request like that. All right, so you're instantiating, right, this object really with keyword new. Okay, the next thing you need to do is open the request. So you type in XHR, use the variable name for the request, dot open. And then you have to make a hard decision. You have to decide what kind of request you're going to send. Now, you have your choice between several. The most common four are called get, post, put, and delete, I believe. Nobody, well, no, I'm not going to say nobody, but it's not as common to use the latter two. So most routes or most requests are done with get and post. Now, there's a lot of confusion about this. So you'll read that a get request is to be used when you want to get something from the server. Like, I want to get your index.html. I want to get puppy.jpg. I want to get my script.js. And post is to be used when you want to send data to the server, which is what we're doing. And that's largely true, but you can actually kind of jerry-rig it to work the other way around. You can actually send data to the server with a get request if you want to. And you can actually get things back from the server with a post request if you want to. I think following best practices, and there's only so much time to show you so many things, we're going to stick to this convention that if you want to post something to the server or send something to the server, we're going to use the post request as opposed to the get request. All right. Now, there are some benefits to using a get request when you send things to a server. One of them being, if you're aware of this, good for you. If not, we'll cover it in another video. But one of those is that when you do send things with a get request to the server, any information that you send actually gets appended up here in the address bar using a question mark sign and then a bunch of key value pairs. If you just kind of click around, if you do a Google search, for example, right? If you go to Google and you just do a little search, Google uses get requests for the information that you send to them. Here, we'll look up coronavirus tips, right? You look at this URL here, if you can see it, it's kind of small. After the search, there's a question mark, and then there's some keys with an equal sign and then a value. If you keep going along for a little while, eventually you'll come to, let's see, it's long, so eventually you'll come to an ampersand sign, like here, and then there's another key, equals, and then another value, and then another ampersand, then another key, and then another value. That's what happens when you use a get request to send things to a server. The things that you're sending actually appear up here in the URL bar. Sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't. With a post request, nothing appears up here. The data that you're sending doesn't get appended to the URL. Do not make the mistake of thinking that that means that the post request is secure. It's totally not. Anybody can still see what you're sending to the server. You can still see it, even if you can't see it in the address bar. You can still see it by looking in your console at what you're sending. So nothing is encrypted or hidden or anything like that. There's a lot of misinformation on the web about that. People say, oh, if you use a post request, nobody can see what you're doing. No. All that means is that somebody standing over your shoulder may not be able to see in the address bar what you're sending. But post requests are inherently no more secure than get requests. If they're unencrypted, and all of this is today, then they're open for anybody to spy on. So somebody using Wireshark to look at the network and intercept packets can see exactly what you're sending, and so on and so forth. Right? You need SSL secure socket layers to protect against that kind of a scenario. All right. So let's do a post request, and we have to make another decision. When we send the post request, what is the address on the server that we want to send to? Where are we going? And we get to pick this because we haven't written that on the server yet. So I'm just going to pick /num as my route, my server. It's called a route or route, however you like to say it, to send my submission to. All right. Now there are other arguments that you can put in here. There's a true or false third argument that you can put. I'm going to leave that off for now. It's not essential for the time being. All right, so that's it. Okay, now we're going to have to go write some server. Well, that's not it. We're not done, but we're going to have to go write some server code after we finish this to configure this route. Great. Okay, next line. The next thing we need to do is tell the server what kind of code, what kind of format we're sending the information in. So are we going to use XML? Are we going to use JSON? Or are we going to use something called URL form encoded? That's another option that we can use. And as I said, there are other things, but by and large, most people pick one of these things, and the ruling party here is going to be JSON. That's what I would argue you should use most often. All right, so it's basically 3 different formats. I'm not going to say 3 different languages because they're not, but it's just 3 different ways of linking information with keys, values with keys, so that so the server can get the information and dissect it and say, oh, I need that, I need that, I need that. So you have to tell the server what kind of information it's about to receive. So the line for doing that, or what you have to do, is set a header in the request. This XMLHttp request has to have a header set. So you, not surprisingly, use set request header on your XHR instance, and you tell it the content type, what you're going to send it, and then this is the choice if you're going to send JSON. Now you're going to forget that. Nobody remember. I don't remember this exactly, right? So you just go look it up, and if you decide to send JSON, you just go get that, and that's exactly what you type and enter, and you're good to go. Now there are lots of request headers that you can set. This is just one of many that can be set, and it's the bare minimum for a server to be able to listen and respond nicely to your request. But sometimes you have to set lots of request headers. If you're using some third-party server, like a weather service or something, to get information about the forecast tomorrow, and you want to go to that server, you may have to set some extra request headers. It's up to the documentation, the API documentation, to tell you about that. All right. So bare minimum, set the request header to talk about the data exchange type. And then you just kind of send it off. All right. Now, the last piece of the request here, though, is somewhat confusing to people. So I'm just going to type xhr.send, and then I'm going to kind of puzzle over, well, what? Like, what do I send? Like, do I send hello? Right? Like, what exactly what do I do? Well, I specified I'm sending JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. So what that means is I have to send something like name : Fred. Something that has a key and then a value separated by a colon, and should be in curly braces like that. That's JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. I can send much more than that. I can send age : 40. I can send phone : 203-258-1234. Right, and there's no end to how much I can put here. So this is kind of just a dictionary, an associative array, whatever you want to call it, of key value pairs known as JSON. If you're in my class, you've seen this before. It's not new to you. Now, some of these things have to be strings, right? That can actually be an integer if I want to leave it as such, right? This, I'm not sure it's a phone number. I should probably make it a string or something like that. That's JSON, and that's what I have to send because I said that's what I'm going to send, right there. The problem is you can't send it raw like that over the web. Everything has to be sent as a string. So to make something a string, you just kind of put it in quotes. But you can see if I do that, I'm going to start winding up with all kinds of problems because the I've already got, it's even the autocorrect is confusing me already. I've got quotes already. So if I try to put a quote here and a quote here, you know, when it parses this line, it's going to get confused because the browser is going to get confused because it looks like this here ends that one. And then this starts a new string, and then this ends it. But that's not what I meant. I meant just the whole thing should become one big, beautiful string. But it can't do that. So in order to do that, you're going to have to start escaping your other quotes by putting in these backslashes. A backslash character is an escape character. It just means that whatever comes immediately after it doesn't have its usual functionality, right? But, you know, is that what I want? I'm not sure. Okay, so this is going to get confusing. So what ends up happening is you make all kinds of mistakes when you try to turn your JSON into a string and escape all the quotes that you want to have in there. So thankfully, somebody, whoever, I'm not, some JavaScript inventor, probably Jonathan Reisig, I'm not sure how you say his name, the original developer of the jQuery library, who's responsible for a lot of this, somebody created a method known as json.stringify. So you can literally just type that like so, and then put the entire payload inside like that, and that just takes care of it for you. It turns it into a string. It stringifies it. So you don't have to worry about all those weird escape characters or anything like that. Makes it suitable to be packaged to fly it over the internet to get to the server. JSON.stringify. Okay, so this I can go ahead and send this to the server, and I think I will in just a minute. Now, the final part of this, of course, is I want to actually use my input box to put something in to get something out of the box, and then send that to the server. But I think, you know, first steps first. So let's see what happens when we do that. All right. Looks good. Yeah. Okay. All right, great. So nothing will happen yet because the server isn't expecting or isn't configured to receive that request. All right, so let me show you what happens if you actually try it. So the server's running, listing on port 500. I haven't changed the server code, so I don't have to restart it or anything. I can just come back here, reload my HTML page. There we go. Boom, it's live. Let's go. I have an error. Let's see. Oh, I have, let's see, JavaScript 11 missing a parentheses. Okay. Line. Am I? Wrong file. String. I am. Right, I need one more to match here. 1, 2, 1, 2. Great. Okay. We'll get the file. No errors, nothing. Okay, let's just click send and try to send that JSON over. Go. Okay, so immediately I get an error. Right here it says post. And this is really significant to be able to look at and to see. So let me zoom in a little bit on that. It says right here, localhost :5000/num not found. I got a 404 error, which just means that the root wasn't found on the server. Yeah, of course not. I didn't write the server code yet to listen for requests to num, to /num. It doesn't exist. All right, so I'm going to have to go and do that. But what's really significant about this is the browser didn't just send it to num. Its request, it actually sent to the whole. It sent to the whole thing, localhost 5000 num. So if you come back to this root here, it's as if, well, it isn't. It is. The browser knows that you meant localhost :5000/num. In fact, you can put that there if you want to, right there. See, if you want to do that, HTTP :// localhost 5000num. But you don't have to, because if you just put that, then web browsers are made to just know that you, to understand that you mean to send this request to the same address that the web page that this came from. So it just kind of knows that. It prepends the rest of the URL before the slash num. All right. Some of you kind of in the comments and in emails to me recently with the last assignment were asking about that. You're like, what URL should I put here? It's not like you have to put in here, http://www. If you wanted to make a request to some server like that, or weather underground, however you spell it, underground.com, right, or something like that. You're not doing that. You're making a request to your very own server, so you don't need that. You just put the root that you want it to go to. Oh, there it is right there, /num. All right, let's go to the server side and set it up so it can receive requests to that root, /num. So here we go, back on the server side. What do we have to do? All right, the first thing is we are going to write that root right down here. It can be here that we write it. It can be down here that we write it, like that. So we literally just, any root that you want to add, you just say app dot, because we have this nice app object, right? That's Express has made that for us. And you just say app dot, and you can say app dot get, or you can say app dot post. We're doing a post root, so app dot post. Post to what? Post to /num. That's the name of the root. We decided, we picked it, so that's what we use. Now, you get to write a callback function for what you want to have happen when a request comes in to this root. What do you want the server to do? Right? I'm going to write the function as an anonymous function. Just say function request, comma, response, and then like so. And then, of course, I need to put a semicolon down here. Now, these two variables, you can call them whatever you want. You can call them X and Y, right? But I highly suggest that you call them request and response, because the app.post method is configured in such a way that it wants its second argument, the thing after this comma, to be a function which itself has two variables. And it's understood that those variables will be the incoming request and the outgoing response from the server back to the client. So you can call them anything you want, but they got to be there. Something has to be there, and it's helpful to you to know what they mean, so you should call them request and response. All right. Now, by the way, another way to write this, if you want to, is you could just go like that. You can just sort of fat arrow it like that. It's called a fat arrow function, where you just remove the word function and you just put parentheses, the list of arguments in there, parameters in there, a fat arrow made from an equal sign and a greater than sign, and then the body of the function inside curly braces like that. So that's a more modern JavaScript way of doing it. That syntax has only been around for a few years. People like it. I don't know, you don't have to type the word function. I'll stick to the more conventional approach for the time being. So I mentioned I would talk about fat arrow functions, right? I said that right down here. So there it is, got that in there. Had to get that in. Okay. So a whole lot of stuff today. A lot of stuff. All right, here we go. Let's do the let's write the code to make this happen. So I can access the incoming request from the client with the req variable request. And I can actually look at it. I can print it, and we can look at what it looks like and see it in the console, and maybe it'll be interesting, and we'll see what we learn about it, right? So these two variables I have access to inside this function. So I'm going to have to drill down into this to get the information that I want from what's coming in. But let's look at the request just for fun. So let's say console.log request, just to see what the client is sending me. Let's see what we get. So back here, all right, I'm going to quit my server. I have to, because I refresh the server code, right? And I run it again. It's still good. Let's refresh this page. I don't have any errors. All right, let's send a request. Again, the box is useless. I'm not doing anything with it, so I'll just click send. All right, and I sent. That's it. I clicked send. Now, a couple things have happened. All right, one, if I go over and visit the terminal where the server's running, you can see a lot of stuff. This is the request. This is everything that the client sent to the browser twice, because I think I clicked the button twice. So let's scroll back up. Let's find where it started. So here it is. I was logging, because remember I said console.log request, and so I'm logging to the terminal here. And and it says incoming message, and look at all the stuff that's here. Right? I don't want necessarily to print all of this, but I sent a lot more information behind the scenes than I really was aware of. Look at it all. All of this information was sent from the client to the server, including somewhere in here information about what browser I'm using, and so on and so forth. Right? And again, I think I said I sent it twice because I clicked the button twice. I don't need all that, but it's there. Cool. The other thing that happened is the client never got a response. So the request is hanging. The client sent something to the server, and the server never responded because I haven't written that code yet. So the client's just out there waiting. It's kind of like if I gave you a gift and I handed it to you and you just opened it and walked away and never said thank you, right? There's no response back yet. And if I go up to my network tab here in the browser and click it, and I go down to num, you can see all the requests that have ever been made in this exchange with the server. This is the num request, right? It says pending because it hasn't completed. So let me refresh the page again so you can see that's not there, right? With a new page, it's not there. This localhost is the document. This is the index.html that I received. I got a 200. There's some other things in here that we'll talk about someday. Here's the script. Here's my script.js, right? This came in a little bit later, a little bit after localhost. Index.html. And you can see it reflected up here in the timeline. First I got index.html, then I got script.js, right? And don't worry about these other things just yet. And that's it. Now I'm going to click the button, and I want you to watch down here. So here we go. Click the button. Boom. There's the request to num that's been sent. But there's no finishing time up here for it. And again, if I click kind of down on it, right, we can see it's got request headers. If I click response, there is none because there's nothing being sent back yet. So it's a hung request. That's a nasty thing to do. Servers should always respond. And in fact, after a while, the browser will just time out and say, enough of you. If you don't respond to me, I give up. Right? So that's what's going on. Let's fix all of that and also get the information that we want. So enough of that. All right. To drill down and get the information out of the request, I need to install another module, another Node module. It's another piece of Node that just lets Node grab things from incoming requests. Now, I think in later versions of Node, you might not actually even need to install this. It might actually, in some cases, it might just come with Express itself. I think I saw it when I was scrolling through my package lock.json file. It's called body parser. Yeah, here it is. It looks like it's already installed, actually, and I can just go ahead and ask for it and use it. But just in case, for those of you that don't have newer versions of Express and or Node, it's traditionally used to have to just install it using npm install. So you'd go back to your terminal here, you'd quit your server, right? And let me clear it. So all right, there we go. And then you would type in npm install. By the way, make sure when you're doing this that you're in the project directory. You don't want to install these things in some other place because Node modules take up space. So just leave them in the project directory. When you delete your project directory, you delete those Node modules. So I'm I'm where I should be. So npm install body. I think it's body dash parser dash save. I think that's, if not, it'll tell me. Yeah. So good. So it's installed. Again, I may not have needed to do that. I probably should have tried it first, but there you have it. All right, I'm then going to come and add a line up here at the top of my server for requiring the body parser module and just create a variable called body parser. Body parser does what it sounds like. It lets you get the body of the request and parse it or dissect it, pull it apart. It's the piece of it's the section of code that understands what JSON is or what URL form encoded means. And so what you usually do at that point is somewhere in your server code, you add lines such as these. So you're telling your server that it should use the URL form encoded version of information exchange or the JSON version. And I would assume that there's one for XML as well. All right, and so which one of these is it that you want to use? Well, we're using JSON, so I'm going to comment that out and just say app.use body parser.json. And that just means that automatically every incoming request, the body of the request, the stuff that the content that's coming with it, after all the headers, is going to be understood to be JSON. Cool. So now let's get the request. So var, inside this root here, right, I'm just going to make a variable, and I'll call it number, var number equals, and now I type request, REQ, that's what I had before, but now I can type body, request.body. And then the great thing, well, you know what, let me just do that. Let's just do request.body for now. All right. And then I'm going to say console.log number. This is not quite what I want yet, but I think it'll prove a point. And then I'm going to say response.send all done. So we'll just give something back to the client so we can stop waiting for something. Okay, let's see what happens. So run. Let's see, where are we? Node server.js runs. Okay, good. Let's come back to here. Let's refresh the page. Let's click send. Boom. Okay, now a couple things happened. First off, look, the request got sent and I got a response. See, now there is so that means this is a big deal, by the way. This means that the server actually talked back to the client and said, we're good. Response, okay? Headers, you can look at the response headers. 200 is what you're always looking for. The nice green, okay. That means everything worked out. You got a good response, okay? So this request is no longer hanging. Great. What did the server get? What did it print? Let's come back over to here. Look what it printed. Great, right? It printed everything that I sent it, the body of what I sent. Let's coming back to my JavaScript right here. You can see I sent it all of that, and that's what it got. That's what happened. Now, I don't really want all of that. I just want some piece of that, right? And I guess I named my variable number. So I guess what I should be asking for is maybe the age or some such thing like that. So the way you do that, it's JSON after all, right? So what I can do is right up here in this line, instead of just saying that number equals request.body, I should just say .age. That is the beauty and the power of JSON. I can't say that with enough emphasis. The ability, once you've parsed it, the ability to just put these dot whatevers and just get the piece that you want out of this data structure. There could be 1,000 things inside here, you know, key value, key value, key value, but you can use .name, .age, .phone, .whatever, and you can just extract the thing that you want, right? So save this. Let's come back to here. Quit the server one more time. Run the server. By the way, if you hate that, you can get a little node module known as nodemon, which is a monitor. It monitors nodemon, and what it does is it detects every time you change your file, your server file, it quits and restarts node for you if you want. I don't use it, but you can. Okay, so here is the server's running. Let's refresh. Let's send the request. Good. All right, the request was sent. You can see it is way over here. That's it. So the initial page loading was here. I got some JavaScript, and then way over here was the request because I waited 1.4 seconds before I even clicked it. And then we'll come back to here, and you can see now I got 40. Sweet. Okay. All right. So let's finish this whole thing. We just got a couple more steps. By the way, I'll just kind of come back and recap at this point. So I've gone through most of this stuff at this point. I've talked about json.stringify, post routes on the server. We've used npm to install body parser and express response.send. I mentioned fat arrow functions, and I even sent data back to the client from the server. I'm just sending all done or something like that. So I hit all that stuff. Okay, let's change what we send to the server by going back to the client's JavaScript, myscript.js, and let's, instead of hard coding this whole thing right here, let's create a variable somewhere up in here to capture what's in the input box that you typed into here, because that's what I want to send. And then we'll put that in here as our package, as our payload. Okay, so I'm going to create that variable right now, var payload. Right, we won't initialize it to anything just yet, and then I'm just going to put it inside here, payload, like so. All right, now what should that be? What is the value of that? Well, I have a reference to my button, which triggers this event, but I don't have a reference to my input box, and I need one to get what's inside of it. So if you go back to your index.html file, you see the input box just has an ID of num. All right, so let's take care of that right off the bat. So up here, I'm going to say var input box equals document. We can use get element by ID, or we can do document.query selector. I'll use that one, and it's going to be that, in quotes, that and that. All right. And the reason I like to call these things input box or something like that is because we often forget, if we just call them things like number, we often forget that the thing that this reference returns is not what's in the box, it's the box itself. And in order to get what's in the box, what the person typed, you have to actually put a dot value on this variable. And so I tend to people make that mistake so often. They just think that this is what's in the box, but it's not. It's the box itself. So I think to avoid that, I like to do things like that, so it's a little bit clearer. All right, so that's a reference to the box. So now what we can do, and by the way, we could have put that in here as well. It doesn't have to be in the global scope, but it's no harm to have it there. So, all right. So what we're going to say is var payload equals number box dot value. That's just going to get the thing that's currently in the box. There we go. Like so. All right. And then we can try to send that right now, except it's going to fail because it's not JSON. It's not key value. It's not in curly braces, and it doesn't have all the, all the stuff that we need. So unfortunately, that will fail, and I'll save you the time of showing you how that fails. So I think it may be a little bit easier if we just to right now just construct the JSON that we need. So we're going to say, and I think we wanted this to be age, right? Because the server is asking for, let's see, request.body.age. Yeah. So I think rather than changing the server and restarting it and all that stuff, we'll just say age is number box.value, and then we don't need the quotes there. And then we can add things if we want to, right? We could say name is Beth, like so, and save it. And we could 1,000 more things if we want to, okay? But I'm really only using that, so who cares about that? That's my payload. It's a JSON object or an associative array with 2 keys and 2 values associated with it. Cool. That payload is what goes in here. First it gets stringified, turned into a string, and then it gets sent off to the server. All right, here we go. Save that. I don't have to restart the server. I can just refresh the page. Let me call my terminal up. Here, you're not going to be able to see it because my window is too big. There we go. Okay, watch the server. It said 40 before. Here I'm going to put some things in here. 70, send. There it is, 70. Okay, 56, send. 56. Awesome. Now, the last piece of this. You notice, you saw before that the server was sending data back to the client, right? And if I click on these num network exchanges here, you can look at the response, and it just says all done every time. That's all I'm sending back. But that need not be the case. I can actually go into my server code here, and I can send you whatever I want to. So I could do some math calculation with the number that you sent me. All right. Now it came as a string, so I'm not sure how this is going to go. Let's see what happens. JavaScript is kind of crafty, and it tries to figure stuff like this out for you automatically. So I think I can just do math with it without having to turn it into an integer. But let's see what happens. So if I just say, let's say, just for clarity, let's say var age times 2 equals 2 times number, like that. So I'm just going to take this number that you send to me, and I'm going to multiply it by 2 and assign it to a new variable, and then I'm going to send that back to you, right? So we'll just age times 2 is what goes inside there. And I could have just taken this and put it right inside here, right? But just for clarity, I did it on a separate line. Okay, let's restart the server because I changed the code inside of it. Go, good, running, great. Okay, back to here. Watch. Right, let's refresh the page. Let's put in 30. Let's click send. Okay. Boom. Oh, there's a problem. Let's see what the problem is. Express deprecated response.send status. What is the problem? Range error, invalid status code 60. Right, of course. Yeah, of course. I can't do that. I can't send that back. I have to send back a string. So for my response. So, well, let's see. What's the easiest way to take I think it's a number at this time. What's the easiest way to take a number and turn it to a string in JavaScript? I think that's just toString, but let's see. JavaScript cast integer to string. Let's see what the quickest way is. It's just toString, just like that. Just take the number and append the toString method to it. All right. So dot to, or let's go like this. We'll do it here. Dot to string, like that. Okay. Great. And back to here and refresh and 30 and send it. Okay, so the server got 30. You can see it down there at the bottom of my window. Let's see what you got back from the server. Right? So now, I mean, it's not a big deal, right? All we're doing is multiplying by 2. We can do that anyway. We have a server that multiplies by 2 and sends a response back. Big deal. But in theory, I hope you can appreciate that this is the beginning of pretty much everything that you do with the web, because there's no limitation on how many people or how many clients can connect to this server right now at the same time. So I could, in fact, send this 60 back to everybody else that was, sending me requests as well. And that would be a way of me, with my browser, communicating with them, with their browsers. The server is now acting as kind of a central hub. I can send it information, and it can send that information back to me. Other people can send in information, and it can send information back to them. And depending on what I do in this node file, I can collect that information. I could build an array of numbers or an array of names. Maybe you type your name in this box, and I start in the server. I just collect every name that every browser has sent me, and then every time somebody else sends me a request, I just send them all the names. And that concept is the beginning of how you make something like a chat room or a multiplayer game where you're constantly sending updates of positions of different people that are connected to your server. This is what it means to be connected to a server like this, right? It means you're exchanging requests and getting responses from it. And now with this in place, so much is possible. All right, so I hope this was informative. I went through a whole lot of stuff, and like I said, it's super long, but it's probably best watched in 3 clips. You can pause it whenever you want. This was originally what I said we set out to do, and I think I did it. As always, leave comments in the video, below the video, or those of you who are in my classes, you know how to send me an email. Let me know if there's further clarification that's needed or anything like that. Thank you for watching. Take care.